RedChip. We build investor audiences for small cap companies, retail and institutional. 33 years, thousands of clients. We are experts in messaging. National TV ad campaigns, investor webinars, digital media, reaching hundreds of thousands of investors. RedChip. We do it well, we do it right, we do it big. RedChip. Call us or email us today.
Hi, this is Craig Brailsford with RedChip Companies. Thank you for joining today's event with First Phosphate, which trades on the OTCQX under the ticker FRSPF and on the Canadian Stock Exchange under the ticker PHOS. Joining us today is John Passalacqua, CEO and Director of First Phosphate. We will begin with a brief presentation in a moment, and then we will open the event to your questions. Welcome to everyone joining us today on X, YouTube, LinkedIn, and other social media platforms. To submit your question, we invite you to join us on Zoom. Use the link provided. Once in Zoom, click the Q&A button at the bottom of your window and type your question into the text box. Before we begin, please allow me to read the Safe Harbor statement. This call may contain forward-looking statements within the meaning of the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995. All statements pertaining to future financial and/or operating results, along with other statements about the future expectations, beliefs, goals, plans, or prospects expressed by management, constitute forward-looking statements. Any statements that are not historical fact should also be considered forward-looking statements. Of course, forward-looking statements involve risks and uncertainties. John, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I'm John Passalacqua. I'm the CEO of First Phosphate. Today I'll go through the investor presentation. First Phosphate is a mining technology company involved in igneous phosphate. Igneous phosphate for the lithium iron phosphate industry and not for fertilizer, because usually when we think of phosphate, we think of, this is just for the LFP battery industry. So the LFP battery that basically commands almost 3/4 of the world's share of battery production, and most of that production is done in Asia and in China in particular. This battery is also the battery with the most promise and the one that's growing at the quickest rate, and it's the battery of mass adoption. When we think of electrification, generally we think of EVs, but when you look at LFP battery, EVs are only 7.1% of the category. The other categories are large-scale transportation, smaller-scale transportation, such as bicycles, scooters, skateboards, wheelchairs, and other devices. There's a national defense component as well, and there's also a telecom component for telecom towers. But by far the largest sector of LFP battery, which is the one excited, is this one here. It's a stationary energy storage. Stationary energy storage is anything for on the small scale, which is as a Tesla battery wall. If you buy a Tesla, for instance, you'll have a battery wall in your home that will also communicate with the rest of the house and charge and discharge energy across the entire home, form of energy storage. But then there's also energy storage in terms of large scale applications such as solar farms, wind farms, or hydroelectric dams. All of that energy has got to be stored somewhere, and it goes onto battery when there's too much of it. Okay, now market really excited right now about lithium is really LFP battery, right? Elon Musk came out with a comment saying that just by adding stationary energy storage batteries, these big batteries that you see here, these big battery parks, we could double the electricity production in the United States. So just taking what we have and better managing it during the peaks and the troughs using batteries, and this is all LFP batteries. Well, the lithium market has heard that loud and clear. The lithium ETF, as you know, is up about 150%, if not more, recently, due to this whole charge now for stationary energy storage and LFP battery. Anybody who's interested in lithium stocks, there's over 150 public companies worldwide in the lithium space. There's about 100 companies in the iron space that can be traded on worldwide exchanges. But in phosphate, we have a problem. There's only about a handful of companies that are into phosphate, and mostly all of them are into phosphate for fertilizer. As far as we know, we're the only company in the Western world that is dedicated to phosphate, but specifically and exclusively for the lithium iron phosphate battery industry with no attachments to the fertilizer industry. And the reason for this is very simple. When you look at the LFP battery, LFP is what goes into the cathode of the battery. That's a positive pole of the battery. It is only 4% lithium, but it's 60% phosphate and 35% iron. This is why the market is focusing right now, we believe, on lithium, but is really disregarding what's most important, which is phosphate, right? Phosphate is going to be the major choke point. If you can't get to the phosphate, well, then the lithium is not worth it at all, because you won't be able to create LFP if it's LFP that's going into the energy. So we view phosphate as very important to really unlocking the value of the lithium for the LFP battery industry. Now, that is supported by the following data. If you look at benchmarks, they say that the most important element for electrification is copper, but second is purified phosphoric acid. That is the highest form of purity of phosphate. That we're going to need 33 new purified acid plants in the West by 2030 to meet the demand from LFP battery. While in the last 60 years in the West, we've only been able to create 5 purified acid plants, and that purified phosphoric acid has been going into traditional sectors for the economy, such as carbonated beverages. You'll find it in Coca-Cola, dental paste, dental toothpaste such as Colgate. Find it in you'll find it in basically paints. You'll find it in baked food. You'll find it in cosmetics, so in pharmaceuticals. And you'll find it also in baked goods, as I was saying, in all kinds of food. And so what you see here, the pale blue line, that's all the current uses for purified phosphoric acid. And as you can see, the supply of purified phosphoric acid is stable, and just traditional uses are already going to outstrip the supply. So then you say to yourself, well, where are we going to get all the purified phosphoric acid for LFP battery? CRU Group is saying, because of the LFP battery, we are going to have to double the amount of purified phosphoric. But if you listen to Benchmark Minerals, it's going to be more by a factor of 5 or 10. Well, where's all this purified phosphoric acid going to be coming from when you've got this really flat supply curve? Because right now, the purified phosphoric acid is being made off of the back of fertilizer-based phosphate, which comes from sedimentary phosphate rock and not igneous phosphate rock. Igneous phosphate rock is really the solution to all of this, because with igneous phosphate rock, we can make a lot of purified phosphoric acid without having to pass through the fertilizer industry. And I'll show it on this slide here. Igneous phosphate rock, about 95% of it converts directly into purified phosphoric acid, which goes into the LFP battery without touching the fertilizer world. Whereas sedimentary phosphate rock, which is phosphate that's kind of found in seabeds at the bottom of sea, or old ancient seabeds, barium in it, it's pure. Purified one time, they put onto fertilizer fields, and only maybe 10-20% in general of the purest material can be converted into purified phosphoric acid, which goes into the batteries. So this is different than the sedimentary rock, which it's pure, it's clean, it's got recyclable gypsum, and almost all of it goes into purified phosphoric acid without touching the fertilizer world. Now, igneous rock, this magical rock that makes a lot of purified phosphoric acid for batteries, only 5% of the world's rock. You'll find some of it here in Northern Europe. You'll find some in Africa. You'll find some in Brazil. And then here in Quebec, we've got the igneous anorthosite, which we're able to purify very quickly with very simple solventless techniques. We're able to get it up to 41% P2O5, the measure of phosphate, and we're able to recover about 90 to 92% of it. And this is because it's phosphate that's caught in magma rock from millions and billions of years ago, and it's so pure that you're able to extract it easily. Whereas all the phosphate in this other basin, the sedimentary basin, is full of cadmium, uranium, thorium, and other impurities, and it's not necessarily ideal for making a lot of purified phosphoric acid. Okay, so now let's talk. Where is this phosphate have found, and in what form does it come? Well, we're very lucky. We found it in an open pit environment. The mine site is 2.5 kilometers wide this way, meters across this way, and it goes down deep about 300 meters, We know that in other countries such as Russia, generally they can mine down to 1.5 kilometers, but we've only gone down to about 300 to 400 meters where it's most economical. And just with what you see here, we've been able to turn this into purified phosphoric acid with our major partner out of Belgium, Prayon. And just with what you're able to see here, we have enough for 25 to 50 years of producing 350 gigawatt hours of LFP batteries, which is enough to electrify half of the fleet of new vehicles in North America for the next 25 to 50 years. That's quite a big number. There's 12 million cars produced in North America per annum. We'd be able to electrify half of them, 6 million of them. The other interesting part here is that the Port of Saguenay, this is just 2 hours north of Quebec City, which is 2 hours west of Montreal. And we're sitting in a very important basin here for industrial activity. This is where Rio Tinto is located. This is where most of the aluminum for North America comes from. And it's also a very important forestry industry in this area as well. So we've got, very talented workforce, very talented equipment suppliers in that basin. We're at basically 70 kilometers. This is where the mine site will be, 70 kilometers from the deep sea port of Saguenay. This is where the phosphate concentrate that we produce will be shipped to the port of Saguenay. A good portion of that will be going off to Europe on definitive bankable offtake, for which we've also already received a prepayment just a few weeks. And then the remaining portion of this phosphate concentrate will remain here at Port Saguenay, where will be processed into purified phosphoric acid using the technology of our partner Prayon out of Belgium. And then once it's in phosphoric acid, what we're able to do, we're able to convert it into LFP cathode active materials, which then by rail line, which is very immensely connected here to the rest of North America, and also by vessel, we're able to get to the rest of North America and the world, which is very important. So supreme logistics as well. So again, just to recap, we plan to, extract and concentrate. That's at the mine site at Bégin-La-Marche. Then 70 there, the deep sea port of Saguenay, phosphoric acid, and also LFP cathode active material, which will then go into the battery cells and the battery packs, which is then go into making the energy storage units, which we spoke about earlier. So this is something that we're really proud about. And what I'm showing here in front of the screen in my hand is, the first LFP batteries that have been made in North America in 25 years using 100% North American critical minerals. So what we did to make these batteries, we took the igneous anorthosite rock from Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, Quebec. We converted it into phosphate concentrate. And we did this with, solventless extraction, very environmentally friendly means. And then with the help of Prayon from Belgium, we were able to turn this phosphate concentrate into purified phosphoric acid. And phosphoric acid, together with the iron powder from GK and Höganäs, which is the world's largest atomizer of steel, we were able to make iron phosphate precursor. That is taking the phosphate and the iron and making iron phosphate precursor. And then with lithium carbonate from Nevada, we were able to make LFP cathode active material, which you see right here. We're able the graphite material from Nouveau Monde Graphite. And with the technology of Ultian Technologies in Nevada, we made these LFP battery cells, the first LFP battery cells made in North America in 25 years. The reason I say the first made in 25 years is technology, believe it or not, was first invented in North America, but by 2003, it left for China and it never came back until, July of last year when we made these first battery cells. Now, what's interesting is we only made 150 of these battery cells, so it was a very small scale batch production, but we tested them at standard commercial test rates, which is charging and discharging them 2,000. And believe it or not, they tested just like out there on the market, which is extremely important because it means that all of the minerals that batteries, as well as the process that went into making them, are now 100% validated for commercial production. And I will also tell you that all of these 6 steps, none of them involve any R&D. They're all commercial processes together with some of the largest partners. This battery chain that we created here is easily scalable. And as you know, there was a big rift between President Trump and President Xi out of China. And the first thing that China said is, we're going to be restricting rare earth materials. We're going to be restricting on microchip technology, and thirdly, we'll be restricting LFP technology. LFP technology is very important to China. It's one of their largest exports, and so it's really important to be able to onshore this supply chain in North America. And this is exactly what First Phosphate has given us its mission to fully onshore the North American LFP battery supply chain. Okay, and we've done it in miniature, and we're able to scale it up. We've de-risked the project through some great relationships. I've mentioned some of them. Also, we've got the local group at the table. They're a full collaborator, and they're actively looking at financing of the company. We've got Quebec government at the table with a letter of interest, and a number of other local partners, local and international, which make a big difference in terms of the key relationships that allow us to scale up and to de-risk the project. Team that meets and beats milestones. Our biggest milestone coming up for 2026 is our feasibility study, which will be delivered by the end of 2026. 2027, we hope to be moving into permitting, and we hope to have an operating mine in place for our off-takers by 2029. Our cap structure is something that we're extremely proud of. We are completely debt-free. We have raised $50 million on our own without any underwriter from associates, friends and family, high net worth institutions. Management and board has put in $4 million of their own money, and most of management and all of the board takes all their compensation stock and RSUs so that we help to leave funds in the company to develop the company. Management and board have 20% of the shares, and our friends and family have about another. That's friends, family, family offices, and some larger institutions. And then there's about 40% that's a public float, and our local Indigenous community has 1% of the shares as well. Our board and our management is experienced business leaders in technology, and also experienced business leaders in terms of the mining industry. So we call ourselves a bit of a mining technology company, in that we are able to do both mining and technology to basically integrate the entire supply chain to eventually get to this, right? Give North America the independence that it needs in terms of onshoring the LFP battery supply chain. Okay, thank you very much, and maybe I'll pass it back on to you, Craig, for some further questions.
Thanks a lot, John. Yes, if you have a question, then we invite you to join us on Zoom. First of all, if you're joining us on one of our many social media networks, use the link provided in your stream. And then once you're in Zoom, as many have already done, click the Q&A button at the bottom of your window and type your question into the text box. Okay, we have some questions here. The Canadian government has been speeding up projects. Have you been in contact with them to speed up your project?
So we're lucky in our project is that we need to go through what is a provincial, like a state environmental review. We do not need to go through a federal environment review. So that is really the speeding up is for projects that need both a provincial and a federal review. They're trying to get it down to one review only. We do not need that. Nonetheless, yes, we have been in touch with the Canadian government, as are all projects. Dollars into the port of Saguenay to build a second wharf, a second quay for boats. Not that we need it, but it would benefit us a lot because our property is located just directly adjacent to that. Yeah, there's a lot of back and forth between the entire mining sector and obviously all the governments, as everybody knows, in touch with all levels of government. But especially important to us is really the local government. We try to work very closely with our local community, our local Indigenous community, our local chambers of commerce, and our local suppliers.
Okay, this person asked, returning to my question from last week, I read in December that First Phosphate had been about to, I'm sorry, this was in French, I'm translating it into English, had been about to make some announcements on the preliminary results, on the progress, on the drilling and preliminary results. Can we know what's going on right now?
Très bien, Craig.
Merci.
I'll answer it in English. So yeah, we announced in October of 2025 that we were beginning another 30,000 meter drill program. To date, we had drilled 30,000 meters. Just to give people, a perception of magnitude, 30,000 meters of drilling is an exceptionally large drill program. It's probably one of the largest drill programs to be conducted at this time right now anywhere in North America. We started that in October. We signaled to the market that we'd be done by April of 2026. We're very much on track with that. The other thing I will add is the reason we're able to do 30,000 meters of drilling so quickly is because of the superior logistics that we have in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region of Quebec. The property that is being drilled right now is only at 40, 50, 60 kilometers from 3-4 major cities, and so we have access to workforce and people can come back and forth and drill and do what they have to do, and we don't even need to set up work camps. So that's a really important thing to note. So that campaign is really basically predicated upon the fact that in order to move into a feasibility study and out of the exploration, you need to have a defined geological model. We had drilled it through 30,000 meters that got us to the PEA, the preliminary economic assessment, put out that document. But now, in order to be able to get to a feasibility study, we need to have a defined move resources indicated and measured, so that once the full geological model is in place, then our board can make a decision whether to move into the feasibility study, and we will have the resource requirements to be able to do that.
Another question here in French. Last week, the government of Quebec announced an investment of 88.1 million. I guess that means Canadian dollars, for strategic and critical minerals in the region of Quebec called Côte Nord and the Port of Saguenay. Do you have a strategy for getting some of that money?
Très bien, again. And so a lot of that money that was announced, government sometimes will announce funding for infrastructure, and other time they will announce funding for companies. I believe a big portion of that, and I still need to go through it, is for infrastructure. So yeah, we will benefit from that infrastructure at the Port of Saguenay. I believe some of it was earmarked towards getting the services at Port of Saguenay, water and I believe it was gas and electricity. All those services, most of them are already there, but it's in terms of expanding them. Just to give the list a magnitude on what's going on. So Port Saguenay has got about 12 kilometers of open industrial land where there's really very little that has been built out there, and the federal government of Canada has put in a to getting ready to go because it's a federal port, but it also requires provincial money. So the federal government puts something in, the provincial government puts something in, and so on and so forth. I think there's been over about 150 it's gone into that port so far, and there's probably about another 100 million pledged. So some of that money from that announcement is towards infrastructure. If there's anything towards companies, it will usually come in the form of grants or subsidies that you have to apply. So if there is an opportunity, we will certainly apply for it. But I want to be very, very specific with everybody. Everybody talks about government having to do everything. First Phosphate is a company that has, started with very little. It started with our own talents, our own hard work. We started with our own capital. We've paid ourselves in stock. We've raised $50 million from the outside community. We do not need government funding in order to advance. It's great. Obviously, the government can contribute. We won't say no. We love to be part of our communities and our government, but we are able to progress with or without the government, and that's what our real strength is. But bring it on, all kinds of government help to this industry.
Please explain the relationship with the Exim Bank.
Yeah, so the Export-Import Bank of the United States is basically what they call an export credit agency. Most countries have these export credit agencies. And usually what it is it helps the exporters of that particular country to export their goods and services. So Export-Import Bank in the United States is interested in funding projects such as ours. We have a LOI in place with them for 170 million. And the reason for that is obviously, a lot of the suppliers of machinery and equipment to the mining industry come from the United States, and a lot of those suppliers need to make multi-million dollar pledges to mining companies and want to have multi-million dollars of sales to mining companies such as ours. So there needs to be a mechanism to finance some of that equipment because it's very expensive up front. So the the United States, what they'll do with somebody like First Phosphate, they'll say, look, we'll guarantee you up to a certain amount of capital that we'll finance, provided that you're buying machinery from the United States, which is great because a lot of the comes from the United States. And we're very happy to work with our American counterparts, and we're very happy to have the Export-Import Bank of the United States in there to support American manufacturers and also support mines like ours to get into production, which then serves further the needs of the United States as well, North America, in terms of producing this phosphoric acid in these cathode active materials, which go into strengthening our joint supply chains.
Hi, John. Congratulations on a very successful 2025. You've talked about getting the iron phosphate and CAM plants going in late 2027 with material provided by a partner. When would you be able to get the non-dilutive funding necessary, and are there any roadblocks?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So about September of 2025, I believe it was, we announced a, uh, uh, a I believe, no, sorry, it was September of 2024. We announced that we would be moving into making an iron phosphate precursor plant. Iron phosphate, the precursor to making LFP cathode active material, which then goes into the batteries such as these. So, sort of the guts of the battery, if you will. Right after we announced in September, October of 2020, so 2024, yes. Guess what happened? President Trump was elected, and there was all kinds of tariffs that came on into Canada. There was some disagreement between the Canadian Prime Minister and the new presidency, and so tariffs made it tough for us to decide to go forward with that business in Canada. We're still looking at doing the iron phosphate precursor plant and the LFP CAM plant, do both of them. We're just kind of trying to figure out, and I believe we spoke to this in a press release in February of 2025. We're just looking at best options to do that, whether we need to do a plant in Canada, one in the United States, or eventually, if the trade situation, if you want to call it that, will de-escalate, and we could do one in one area that could suffice for both markets. We're still working forward to that. There's a lot of non-dilutive capital on the table. There's a lot of also private capital on the table for that. We're looking very carefully at that. We're just trying to make the right decision. We've been continuously putting off the decision in 3 months blocks, hoping that the trade situation would be over. We thought it should have been over by now, pointed that it isn't. But we will do what we shall do, and we will let others do what they need to do. But yes, the LFP CAM plant and the iron phosphate top of mind at First Phosphate. It would represent our tertiary transformation plant after the concentrator to make the phosphate concentrate, and the phosphoric acid plant. After that, that's when the iron phosphate and the lithium plant comes into play. And yes, as the listener pointed out, we could start that ahead of our own production using the minerals of some of our other partners. That's very much top of mind. We're just finalizing some of those decisions at the moment. And yes, the non-dilutive capital is at the table. We would only do that in a very non-dilutive way, and we would only do that with partners, many of which are already at the table.
You mentioned a European customer that has already reserved 20% of the phosphate, if I'm not mistaken. Have you any other major clients approach you?
So that's the table, and that client has put forward a deposit. You might have seen that press released in January of this year. They put forward a small deposit payment to show prepayment, to show that they're there, to show their government and our government that they're there, and that the government should be talking and doing everything possible to help First Phosphate to develop, because it's a strategic for them and their country. So basically, that is our one and really our main off-taker. There are many other off-takers that are interested, but to this point we've said no, because there isn't the strategic value there, and we know that when we produce at the mine, most of what we produce will be internalized for our own use to make phosphoric acid. So out of the 900,000 tons that will be produced, 500,000 tons goes to ourselves. 200,000 tons goes to this off-taker in question, and there's only really 200,000 tons remaining. So it's not that down to off-take. We know that as soon as that comes out of the ground, that will be taken over 5, 6 over. There's such a need for it. So why why encumber the company so early on? The other mention also is the current leading off taker. There's no price ceiling, there's no price floors. That offtake floats that market. And that's the way we want to keep it. We want to be very careful with offtake. I know a lot of companies out there like to take offtakes early because they like to put a logo on their deck saying, hey, I work with this company and that company. But sometimes they actually get what they wish for, right? They lock themselves in, but they lock themselves in too early. Prices change, things change, and then you're locked into those contracts. We haven't done any of that at First Phosphate. We're very conscientious about the future and giving the shareholders value and not encumbering our future value.
Thanks, John. How many full-time employees, management included, does the company have currently?
Well, I mean, look, there's a series of full-time employees. There's a series of contractors. There's a series of subcontractors. I mean, if I had to tie it all together, how many people are there around the company right now? There's probably a good 50 people around the company. I wouldn't say all full-time, many part-time, many subcontractors, many part of sort of our partner companies. But there's a good 50 people around the world around First Phosphate right now. We have tremendous talent. We're inundated on a daily basis with resumes of some of the most top-notch people coming from some organizations and some positions in those organizations that would shock anybody. Everybody sees us as a very innovative company. The future of what's going to be happening here in phosphate and in electrification. And we're proud to hire the best of the best. And I think that's what we got. We got a great team of great people, great hard workers. And people that really gel together. We have a very, very low attrition rate, and we've got a long lineup at the door with resumes to come into the corporation. Very proud of that. Very proud of our team.
Once again, to submit your question, please join us on Zoom. Use the link provided. And once you're in Zoom, click the Q&A button at the bottom of your window and type your question into the text box. I see someone with a raised hand. If you could type in your question, that would be great. We're not going to take any spoken out questions today. So use the text box and we'd be happy to take your question there. Can you talk about batteries other than LFP that use phosphate?
Batteries other than LFP that use phosphate? No, I cannot. And remember, LFP batteries are now about 3/4 of all the batteries produced. There's 75% of the batteries out there in the world. There's talk sometimes about sodium ion batteries, new batteries that would use sodium instead of lithium. There's talk of solid state batteries. Solid state batteries is where the electrolyte, I would say cord that links the anode to the cathode, of that no longer being made out of liquid, that being made out of some form of ceramic. There's a talk about a lot of things out there, but from my understanding, from what I've seen, the reason that we're in the LFP battery industry, lithium iron phosphate, it's because it's been the longest one out there. It's been out there since 2001. It was invented in North America. It has taken over everything. It's all stationary energy storage is almost 100% LFP battery. Vehicles now are almost half LFP, and they're even starting to replace the NMC for the longer duration charges with lithium iron manganese phosphate. LFP is safe. It's economic. It's the choice. China, all over North America, all over Europe, all the factories are starting to convert over to LFP. It's just a massive trend. I've said to everybody before, LFP, right? In the lithium, it's only 4% of the cathode. The iron is 30% cathode, and then you've got the phosphate, which is about 61% of the cathode. Start focusing on the phosphate. LFP is here to stay. Karim Zagib, which was one of the forefathers of the LFP battery, I met him in Montreal, and he says, I think that LFP is like the lead acid battery of the last century. You could have LFP battery for the next 100 years. Again, we don't know if that's what's going to happen, but at least for the next 1-2 decades, it's all about LFP batteries. Production up as soon as possible. There's not enough materials to make the LFP battery. We know where the lithium is. You got 150 companies worldwide producing lithium, but where are we going to get the phosphate? Where are we going to get the phosphate uniquely for the LFP battery industry, the purified phosphoric acid? And I believe that's only from igneous phosphate rock, and that's exactly what First Phosphate is doing. We're looking to mine the igneous phosphate rock out of Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, Quebec. It mines clean, it converts clean. It's easy to do. We've got the whole process to do it, to create all the purified phosphoric acid needed for, you know, the next 10, 20 years of LFP for us to take a really big and to get up here into production as soon as possible. So I see LFP as the future of electrification for at least the next 10 to 20 years.
What is the biggest overall risk of this project?
Biggest overall risk of the project, I think, would be obviously funding capital. Obviously, you know, governments, something the government could do. But you know, fairly stable government in Quebec. Locally, it's very stable. Also, Canada, fairly stable. North America, arguably, also fairly stable. Capital, yes, every project, the issue is capital. But look what we've got, right? I've already pointed it out. We've already been able to make the LFP batteries. We've proven it all through commercial methods. All we have to do is be able to scale it up. There's a number of other projects out there and a lot of R&D involved. There's no R&D here. We're fully commercial, we're fully scalable. And what we've also done is we focused specifically on the LFP battery. The reason we did that is so that we could have, you know, the best cost of capital and the best CapEx. Our Bégin-Lamarche property doesn't require any building of new bridges, nothing that's, you know, majorly out of the question. We're all in existing infrastructure. We're 70 kilometers from the deep sea port of Saguenay. We've right-sized the project to keep it small, to keep the CapEx tight. The CapEx on that concentrator in that mine is $400 in US dollars, and that's with a 20% contingency built in. It's extremely, extremely reasonable in the world of mining. Most projects are well over $1 billion. So we feel that, you know, we're in a good spot to be able to capital. It's true, capital. Not everyone's going to get the capital, but we got the right product at the right time. We got the right logistics and the right infrastructure behind this.
This person follows up. When will be the next largest milestone that could have an effect, positive or negative, on the stock?
Oh, well, we get that question often. And what we say is obviously, you know, there's a lot of things going around companies. There's a lot of things that, you know, obviously are material cannot disclose, but we disclose the milestones that, you know, are publishable. And, you know, the next big thing is to finish off this drilling program, which will end at the end of April. After that point, our board will make a decision to move to a feasibility study, which is, you know, targeted to be produced by the end of December 2026, and then to move into permits. Obviously, that's a really big step to get a feasibility study out. I also mentioned the company is fully funded for that feasibility study. We have the full capital in the bank, about $24 million at the moment, to be able to get through that feasibility study without having to raise capital. So that will be a large, momentous a development for the company. Finishing this drilling program, deciding whether to move into the feasibility study, completing the feasibility study, and then getting permits by early 2027. And like I said, in between now and then, there's lots of things that can happen, lots of discussions on the go. And then if you look back on our news from, excuse me, 2025 and 2024, you'll see that this is a news-driven company. It's a company that moves fast. We might be a mining company in a way, but we really see ourselves as a technology company. We move as quick as a technology company, so lots can happen between now and the end of the year. But our major milestone is the completion of the feasibility study after the drilling and the decision made to move to.
Is phosphate used in solid batteries?
I think what they mean by that, maybe they mean solid state batteries.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll answer it along those lines. So, and again, this is a little bit of a misconception in the market, or sometimes it's not explained out well enough. So there's something called solid state batteries. So solid state batteries are basically batteries where, in each battery, there's the anode and the cathode, the positive and the negative pole of the battery through which, the electricity flows through. So in order to get from the anode to from the cathode to the anode and back, there's a conductor, like a conductor wire, if you want to call it that. Currently, that is made out of liquid for the most part, and that is where in the nickel manganese cobalt batteries, not the LFP, there's been a lot of fires that have been started because of liquid overheating or there being problems in there. And so what they've tried to do is move that from a liquid state to a solid state. So it would almost be like conductor wire made out of some form of ceramic or some other form of non-liquid, so that the fire hazard would be lower. And that's what they call solid state batteries. But it doesn't change anything else about the battery, right? It's still a nickel, manganese, cobalt with solid state conductor, if you will, or lithium iron phosphate with a solid state conductor between the anode and the cathode. It doesn't mean that you're replacing the materials in the anode and the cathode. Anode usually being graphite, and the cathode usually being lithium iron phosphate. Now, where there's some confusion along that same question is people say, well, what about sodium ion batteries? Well, yes, that is a little bit of a threat, especially to the lithium battery. Instead of using lithium iron phosphate, you'd be using sodium iron phosphate. So it's about swapping out the lithium, which is very expensive, for sodium, which is lower in cost. And it's actually the reason why nickel, manganese, and cobalt were swapped out for iron phosphate, because iron phosphate are lower, less expensive materials to make the cathode out of. Instead of nickel, manganese, and cobalt, you've got iron and phosphate. So if they went to sodium batteries instead of lithium, they would move to sodium. As you know, sodium is, still needs to be refined, but it is a lot less expensive and more available than lithium. So that's the difference when they say, sodium ion versus lithium ion, and when they say solid state versus, regular electrolyte driven batteries.
All right, John, we are out of questions. So this might be a great time to wrap up. We're 5 minutes away from the top of the hour anyway. That's all right with you, unless you have any final words you want to say.
Look, final words, and I think I've said it a few times during this presentation, right? Everyone's all on fire about lithium, right? Because of what? Energy storage, because energy storage runs on what? LFP, lithium iron phosphate. Well, let's stop focusing on the first letter in that phrase of lithium. Iron, we know, is available, right? It's scarce, but it's available in iron powder. But phosphate, where on earth are we going to get all the purified phosphoric acid to make all this LFP? And what is the lithium actually worth if you can't get to the phosphate to make LFP? So, take your time, look into it very deeply and very carefully, and don't forget about phosphate when you're talking about LFP. And when you're talking lithium, don't forget about phosphate either, because without the phosphate, the lithium might not be worth that much on its own either.
Thank you, John, and thank you very much to everyone who came back after last week's audio problems. I think this was a great thing to do. John, thank you so much for those great answers to some really good questions. For more information on First Phosphate, reach us at 1-800-RedChip or email us at FRSPF@redchip.com. Please visit the information page created by RedChip for First Phosphate. It's FRSPFinfo.com. There you can view and download today's investor presentation and fact sheet and register for news alerts on First Phosphate. Watch Small Stocks, Big Money, RedChip's program featuring exciting small cap companies every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg USA. And finally, join RedChip's next webinar with Gorilla Technology Group tomorrow, Wednesday, January 28th at 4:15 p.m. Eastern. Register for all RedChip webinars at redchip.com/events. Thanks again to our many participants today, and thank you, John.
Thank you, Craig. Much appreciated. Thank you to all attending.